Hi everyone, Jaynes Mansfield here bringing you yet another video. Oh my god, you guys, we are doing another installment of Iconic Blondes. Yes, so I decided I'm just going to get it out of the way because I know y'all are going to ask me for it down the road. So I'm doing as our second installment, Jayne Mansfield. Never heard of her, no kidding. I am doing my favorite, most iconic blonde in my own eyes, Jayne Mansfield, my absolute favorite. Now, I could do her classic 1950s finger waves, but a little longer, but I feel like it's too close to what I just did with Marilyn. Like, it's literally Marilyn's hair, only longer. We're going to go into the late 1960s, right around the period before she had passed away. We are going to be doing 1966 to 1967 Jayne Mansfield era hair. Yes, we're doing Jayne meets Mod. So I'm going to get prepped up. I have some blonde wigs right here from Jaymes Mansfield Beauty. Yes, and we're going to make some Mod Mansfield hair. Be right back. All right, we are back. Now, I have a lace front all pinned onto the head. Now, truthfully, I could probably do this wig without a lace front wig. I'm pretty certain the one she's wearing is not a lace front wig. But I'm going to do it on lace front today just to make it a little more like high end, a little more like costumey in my eyes. So it's more like a drag queen's wearing its actual hairstyle as their hair. So what I'm going to do here is divide a section for the bangs. And we are going to roll that after it is all separated. I like to call this like the princess cat look. It's a ponytail that's pinned up into a big beehive with a bow in the center, and she would sometimes put like a bracelet over it to make it more dressy. And it was usually like French twisted to the side, or she wore it long and flowing. This is basically the hair Jayne wore in the 60s when she was touring, which I'll get more into as I start talking about her. And we're only gonna be doing curling to the front section of the hair because that's the only thing that needs it. Because for mod hairstyles, you only really have like curls or structure in the face to help frame it, because that's part of mod hairstyling in the 60s. People were having fun with their hair and experimenting. Now, for those of you who don't know who Jayne Mansfield is, Jayne Mansfield was an actress from the 1950s to the mid-1960s. That was when she was active. She was active all the way up until her death. Now, the way Jayne Mansfield had come about is she was originally from Pen Argyl, Pennsylvania. She was an army guy's wife who basically moved her to Texas, and she started getting a lot of attention on the army bases for basically posing around in a blanket in a bikini, and she was getting a lot of negative attention from the army wives. So she was very scandalizing at the start of everything. But she always had ambitions to be an actress. Around this time, there was a budding star named Marilyn Monroe, who was just around the horizon making a huge splash in pictures. Not one to suffer fools, Jayne Mansfield knew she could jump on this trend because blondes were in. So some might say this is like her idea of copying Marilyn, but I don't think that's the case because there were lots of Hollywood blondes before Marilyn Monroe. And also Marilyn Monroe had taken pages out of other actresses' books her damn self, so no one can actually say who's the OG here. But it was the 1950s, and basically it was the generation of, you know, soft sex appeal. And what I mean by that is like they wanted tantalizing and titillating, but safe, if that makes any sense. Jayne Mansfield was scandalizing, but just scandalous enough to where it wasn't lewd or obnoxious. Like, she always played within a realm of being risque, but also not being risque to a point where women hated her. Which is one of the things I thought was so fascinating about her. Like, in feminist theory, they really like Jayne Mansfield. They wrote a lot of books about her. I'm going to curl this and I'll be right back. All right, we are back. I had this all curled up. I was talking a little bit about how Jayne Mansfield is so popular amongst a lot of modern feminists because honestly, she had so much agency in her career. And the direction that it took and the look and the image that she developed, they were her creation. Like, she sat around and thinking about what she wanted to look like, how she wanted to market herself, and what she wanted in her life. She didn't let people tell her no. Basically, everything that a female star was required to not do, she would do. Like, she wasn't allowed to get married. She married someone. She wasn't allowed to have kids. She had 5. Like, nothing stopped her. And they wanted stars to like really behave themselves and not take on outside endorsements and things like that. Jayne Mansfield did not do that. She would go to the opening of an envelope. Like, if there was a supermarket opening or anything she could promote to get free stuff, she was there. If there was a quick paycheck, she was honestly going to be there because she knew there would be a camera crew there. Or she'd make deals with grocery stores sometimes to like let her take photos inside, and they would let her basically pick out all the groceries she wanted. It was a trade-off for publicity. She was kind of like the first influencer. If you think about it, she would have loved YouTube and Instagram and influencer culture because that was her life. She was influencer culture. You know, the trade-off is I have this many fans, so you should let me have this. Like, I never really thought about it that way, but yeah, she's kind of like the first influencer before it all became a thing. Brand endorsements and things like that. She didn't care. She would slap her name on anything. There is a whole slew of Jayne Mansfield products from the 50s and 60s onward that were just like quick cash grabs. We are back combing the shajesus out of her because we're doing 1960s hair. It is Jayne Mansfield's take on mod hair, where it has elements of like soft, beautiful, sex symbol kind of hair with a little bit of a modern 60s twist. Come 1967, Jayne Mansfield, not to be one that's out of date or out of trend, was switching her hair up to a point where it didn't even look recognizable to her from the 1950s. Like, she was wearing beehives, bows, switches. It had completely gone insane. So that's the kind of hair we're gonna try and capture today. Like, she basically was a woman in her 30s dressing like a girl who was 16. She'd be wearing mini skirts and go-go boots, beehives, bows. And like, you watch her on like talk shows back in these times, and she was fully all about the lingo. Like, if you ever notice when I say things like no cap and stuff like that, that's kind of like where I'm getting it from. Because like Jayne would be on TV shows like that where she's just like, oh no, people aren't doing the twist anymore. The twist is out. It's all about the Watusi now. Like, she's in her 30s talking about dances 16-year-olds are doing. And these like grown men like hosts are looking at her like, what the hell? And she would get up and do the Watusi with whatever like hot band was on the talk show that day. Like, she was really hip and down. She was down with the kids. Like I said, she would have loved YouTube or anything like that, where you're basically putting yourself out there, because that's what she was known for. She was known for doing too much and doing the most. If it got her attention, she didn't care. Which brings me to the reason she had gotten discovered. So, Jayne Mansfield was a stunt queen. Like, this is what she had done. Jane Russell, who was a very popular actress at that time. She had been in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Marilyn Monroe. She was the brunette. And she had starred in this film called Underwater. They had a bunch of little starlets at the premiere of Underwater. All these little starlets in bikinis at poolside. Basically, it was, you know, an excuse for gross photographers to ogle girls and look at them in their bikinis. But Jayne Mansfield, being the person that she was, who wasn't afraid to put herself out there in a way to be noticed, and knowing what would get people's attention, she fell into the pool by accident. And when she emerged from the water, her red bikini top had floated away from her. So she was completely topless in the pool, causing a frenzy of photographers to take pictures of her that wouldn't make the papers, but it did make print. So people did know Jayne Mansfield had lost her top in the pool. And that was just one of the first publicity stunts she had pulled. Like, I'm telling you, YouTuber. She'd be such a YouTuber now. One of her other stunts she had done was the way she had met her husband, Mickey Hargitay. Mickey Hargitay, who is from Hungary, he is a former Mr. Universe, and he was working in Mae West's show as a muscle man. She had this show in the Latin Quarter where she basically paraded around, sang songs, and these big muscly guys would like come out and be like, you know, her male props. Well, Jayne Mansfield saw Mickey Hargitay and went bananas for him. She basically, the quote is, I'll have the steak and the guy on the left. They had met each other and they both just went head over heels for each other. Like, it was love at first sight. When Mickey Hargitay had told Mae West he had fallen in love with another woman, Mae West's main man, Paul Novak, punched him out. But it was such a scandal that the papers just ran with it that Jayne Mansfield had stolen Mae West's boyfriend. And Mae West actually went so far to sue Jayne Mansfield for alienations of affections, which is just legalese for she was suing her for stealing her boyfriend. Only in the 50s. I love that. I wish I could do that. Could I sue the girl who married Finn Balor? I'll run it by LegalTube. Which I guess leads me to a little unpleasant part of the video when it comes to publicity stunts. Certain publicity stunts that did not go well for her. And moments where people played the girl who cried wolf with her. The first one was Jayne and Mickey, when they were on vacation, were actually in a boating accident where the boat capsized and Jayne went under and he couldn't find her for a long period of time. When he found her, he eventually revived her, but they were stranded on top of a boat that was capsized.
They had gotten horrible sunburns and she'd nearly died. But when the pictures were taken and the story was leaked, nobody believed it actually happened. They believed they faked it. But it was really one of those instances where she could have died and nobody took her seriously because she was known for pulling stunts. And the second one, which is the one everyone seems to run with, which I'll clear up right now, was the stunt with Anton LaVey. Now, the Church of Satan, believe it or not, had gotten a lot of publicity back in the 1960s because like they make an appearance there just to like seem open-minded and seem a little edgy. Edgelording, which is a thing we know today. Well, not one to pass up cheap publicity, she had staged a photo shoot with Anton LaVey, and she thought it'd be a nice little way of like shock value. Get the people talking about her because she had needed the press at that time because she was going to go on tour. So she wanted to get as much buzz going as possible because her next tour was basically satire on a strip mixed with singing, which is basically she took her clothes off and sang. Nevertheless, she was doing something that was sinful in the eyes of many and tantalizing, so she wanted to add a bit of edge and grit to this very clean-cut, kind of corny 1950s persona at that point. So she staged this photo shoot, and her boyfriend had basically pissed off Anton LaVey after was making fun of him. And the story goes is that he told Jayne to leave this man at once or nothing good will come of it. And they ran with the story that they put a curse on him, which y'all know me, I don't believe any of that stuff, so whatever. A curse was put on her, and he ran with it as soon as that horrible accident happened with her in the car, which we all know is attributed to the fact that they had left too early in the morning and the person that was driving the car didn't get enough sleep. So they were basically falling asleep at the wheel and not paying attention. But that has nothing to do with a curse. Maybe that's just a coincidence. Curses don't exist. That was one of the instances where it really backfired on her. When the photos got leaked out, papers weren't really interested. It was all just seen in really, really bad taste. It backfired on her. It was really horrible. And she had to try really hard to recover from that. That was just another thing piled on top that did not work. Oh, I have to, before I move on, from the stunts. Her most famous stunt of all, a lot of y'all already know this, or may know the picture of Sophia Loren looking over her like, what had happened was Jayne Mansfield, not one to miss an opportunity, showed up to this press junket Sophia Loren was at. It was a celebratory dinner to welcome her to America. Jayne Mansfield was trying all night to get her, basically her strap to break on her dress. It was something she had done a lot where she would flex her chest and the strap would break. Well, all night she was trying it. She was just bending over her like, hey, Sophia, and hugging her. And like every time there was a camera around, just like trying her hardest to get this moment where as soon as she hugged her, the pop on her strap would go and she'd be like, you know, shoulder out like, oh my God, my dress broke. And, you know, she'd get that picture. Well, needless to say, Sophia Loren was looking at her at the table because as Jayne was sitting there flexing, a certain bit of her chest area was popping out. So she was looking at them like they're about to basically drop on the table. Meanwhile, Jay's just sitting there just like, not a thought in the world that the fact that she's basically about to have a malfunction happen. That's the story behind that. Sophia Loren wasn't pissed about it. She was just looking at it like, what is happening here? Like, does she know?
Honey, you know you got a titty hanging out?
But people ran with the story and it made for an iconic picture.
All right, I am back. Now, I have taken down some of the rollers as well as I have teased it up. I have the back section pretty much the way I want it. It just needs a little bit of smoothing. I already started pre-smoothing it. It's just going backwards. Now we've talked about how stunty Jayne could be. Let's talk about her film career because I feel like that's another thing people often ask me about. I don't really like a lot of her movies. I love her as a person, but I'm not partial to any of her movies, honestly. A lot of her movies haven't aged terribly well and they feel old when you watch them. Like you watch them like, oh, this is gonna be a chore to get through. Like, The Girl Can't Help It. It's fun because of what it represents and what a moment in time it was. But as a film to watch, it's really a slug to get through. It feels like a teen movie that was written by 40-year-olds that had no understanding of what teens were actually like. Mind you, Jayne Mansfield's only like 26 in it, but she's with Tom Ewell, who is a gross old man, which is also kind of the other thing that I don't like about a lot of her movies. And Marilyn's too, where they're always paired off with these really like butt ugly guys that are gross and basically treat them like props the whole movie. It's hard to really get into it just from that perspective alone. It kind of like takes me out of it. I know they're trying to tell the story of like the every man can get a really beautiful girl, which is a story I don't need to watch anymore. I'm sorry. Don't like that story. Find a better one. And for the most part, for her early career and all of her best looking movies where she looks the most radiant in, that's kind of, you know, the backdrop for it. And I'm not into it. That being said, her Italian films, I can get into those all day. Like, she looks crazy in them, and she's taking the most risks because that also has to do with the fact that
Fox was putting her in those movies to teach her a lesson. They're making an example out of her, so it's just like the tea that goes into movie making that's always interesting. The way they used to punish actresses is really messed up. Let me explain. Now, I mentioned before that Jayne Mansfield had 5 children, and 20th Century Fox did not like this. They did not like having their actresses pregnant, and they not like having their actresses married, because they basically wanted ownership of them. They wanted ownership of their lives and how they were promoted. They could put them on studio dates with other actors to promote their movies and things like that. They felt like they were property. And Jayne was no different. When she was signed to basically to put Marilyn Monroe in check, because at that time, newspapers were saying she was being very temperamental, which just means they asked her to do things and she was saying no. That's all that really means. It's all code for that. So Jayne Mansfield was brought in, and she was never really taken seriously as an actress. Now, Jayne wasn't actually a very good actress. As far as it goes from the scale of blondes, like Jane, Diana, and Marilyn were pretty much neck and neck. Jane and Diana were really refined actresses if they actually were given the chance to do good material. But yeah, like if you watch like Jayne Mansfield in The Hangover from the Alfred Hitchcock hour with her real hair out, she is incredible if she was given good material. But that was also the thing is, with blonde actresses like that, it was never going to happen. They were never going to be taken seriously at that time by studios like that. Back to the Italian pictures. As a way to punish Jayne Mansfield, every time she had gotten pregnant, Fox would loan her out to Italian studios to do movies. Now, Jayne would only be getting paid her contract salary, but 20th Century Fox would get paid a huge amount of money for loaning her out. And she saw none of that, which pissed her off because the movies were terrible. 20th Century Fox didn't care because she honestly was just there to be loaned out like property. She was basically, a beautiful, sexy lamp that could be used as background scenery in these Italian movies. It was easy to see why that had gotten pretty old with Jayne. Now, mind you, there's 2 sides to every story. That's the side a lot of biographies tell. The other one is that the fact that Fox had plans for Jayne to do more movies. She was just pregnant all the time, so she couldn't do them. So a lot of great roles she had missed out on because she couldn't work. So they basically gotten fed up with her, and this was their way of still using her with also being able to make money off of her namesake because she couldn't work a lot of the time. But it's also pretty messed up that they made all that money off of her and she didn't see a dime of it. One of the big reasons Jayne Mansfield was laid off from Fox, she was not the only actress that was laid off. Cleopatra had really taken a toll on 20th Century Fox when they had made it. With Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, it was one of the most expensive movies ever made, so much to the point that it nearly bankrupted the studio, and they laid off a bunch of people, directors, actresses. Jayne Mansfield just happened to be one of them. Joan Collins lost her job because of it, and she was supposed to play Cleopatra over Elizabeth. Now, had Joan Collins gotten that role, I'm pretty sure Jayne would probably still be working, but, they gave it to Elizabeth, and the rest is history. Or honestly, if an actress that was more suited to play Cleopatra had gotten that role, it would have been a much better film, but here we are. This point in Jayne Mansfield's life, this is long after Mickey Hargitay, and let's just say Jayne Mansfield's life wasn't heading in a great direction. Her career was kind of skidding towards an unknown territory. Like, she didn't really know where she was going. And there was a lot of movies that were scheduled to have her in it that we don't know if she ever would have made them. Like, the film she was supposed to make before she had died, she'd signed the contracts for it. It was going to be in England. It's a horror movie called The Ice House, which ended up going to Sabrina, who was a blonde pinup kind of girl in the 1960s. Very similar to Jayne, very heavy-chested girl. But yeah, Sabrina ended up taking the role that Jayne would have played, which is honestly the girl that dies in the opening of the movie. That was one of the films she was signed on to do. Like, her movies got worse and worse as time went on. Like, from The Fat Spy to what would have been The Ice House, Single Room Furnished, like, they're all bad. The last thing she had really done that had any kind of merit and was a success and a hit was The Guide for the Married Man, which was a Fox studio film that she was called back for as a guest spot. It was honestly just a glorified cameo. Enjoy her for the fun celebutante that she was, because her movies are nothing to write home about. I love how y'all always try and give me new factoids about Jayne Mansfield, not knowing that I know everything at this point. Like, there's nothing you can tell me that I have not heard. The only people that could possibly tell me something I don't know is her own family. And I can guarantee you right now, they ain't talking to me. I'm certain they have no interest in talking to me. That's my one encounter story, which I don't even think is true. I think someone was just messing with me. When I was at DragCon one year in New York, a person came up to me in my line and told me, I teach Mariska Hargitay's son's soccer team. And I tried telling her a little bit about you, and she didn't seem very interested. I think they're just pulling my leg. I don't know if that's true or not, But if it is, I'm kind of obsessed. Like, she's thought, oh, drag queen, nope. No, I'm good. You can keep that one to yourself. I love that. I was like, it makes sense too. Like, I completely understand that she didn't want to talk about her mom. And honestly, she wouldn't really know a whole lot because she was very, very young when she had passed. Like, Mariska was like 3. And I was just like, no one wants to drug up bad memories. So it's completely understandable that she doesn't really talk about it. Nobody wants to like relive that trauma in an interview. You kidding me? I am going to get her all smoothed out and I'll be right back with the final result. All right, I am just smoothing out the back of the hair. I have it all pinned back like that. Like I said, it's literally just a half French twist, like the most bare bones pinning job ever. Just poop, 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 poop. But for the most part, that's how she would do her hair. Like she'd have it parted in the side and the back like that so that she could put one bit of it in the front. And she'd switch it up from time to time. Sometimes it's long on both sides. Sometimes it's all pushed to the back. But for the reference I'm going off of, it was for the most part styled like this. This is her formal hair for like doing shows and stuff. It's honestly her real bangs pulled out front to disguise the edges. And I used the lace front to try to mimic that. I trimmed a lot more off like right here near the sideburn parts to really cover that up to give it that nice little spit curl effect. And the other end, I left it long like it was when I cut it for you to kind of twirl it around because it honestly, it all makes no sense. Like, I don't know what story she was telling, but I'm fascinated to know more. And this is her formal occasions hair, like getting ready to do a number at a supper club. I'm going to trim a little bit more and try her on. I'll be right back with the final results. Welcome back. This is the final result. And oh my God, like I'm having a little bit of a freak out right now because this looks like her hair. Like she would wear her hair like this, like in the late 60s. This was Jayne Mansfield's hair. Like really, really long, kind of sexy, a little young, like very youthful. Like she was very much channeling whatever teenagers were doing at that time while she was in her 30s. I would like to take a moment, a Ven moment where I thank everyone who's tipped me on Venmo. I would like to thank Sherry, Brittany, Malaya, Sean, Patrick, Sarah. Oh, Jaime, good Lord. Your first installment of Iconic Blondes is what I live for. Beautiful work and Hollywood history. Some Like It Hot is one of my favorite movies, but I had no idea what she went through during that movie. Keep enlightening us all. Thank you, Jaime. Oh my God. I'm glad you liked it. Jessica. And of course, Sergio. I would also like to thank Paul and Regina. My goodness. Thank you for the delightful content. You're welcome, Regina. Now thank you all so much for the tips on Venmo and the Cash Apps. Alrighty, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, bye. Now hit the outro. Click here and watch episode 1 of Iconic Blondes. Marilyn Monroe. Or so you put my straight front in drag. Come on, click it. You know you want to. If you don't click it, I'll shove your face through a birthday cake. So click it.